Fellas, we're getting close to UFC 300, so I thought I'd go through every single fight on the card from the early prelims all up until the main event and rate every single fight on the card out of 10, with 10 being, obviously like it's the best fight you could possibly make, and then anything close to 0 is it's a horrific fight. It should have never been on UFC 300. Let me know your own personal ratings, or at least a rating for the main event. But starting off with the first fight on the card, we've got Deiveson Figueiredo versus Cody Garbrandt. Now, personally, I really like this fight. I don't think this should be the early prelim opener. Apparently, the UFC want to start the card off with a bang, which, fair enough, it is a good fight. And I'm personally giving this fight a 7 out of 10. I'm really interested. I mean, you've got two former champions. They're both coming off good wins. Obviously, Deiveson Figueiredo coming off a good win over Rob Font. And then Brian Kelleher just got beaten by Cody Garbrandt as well. So they're both kind of, just close to getting into... Well, I feel like Cody Garbrandt, if Cody Garbrandt wins this fight, I think it could push him into title contention, which is crazy because he's not even ranked. And I'm not saying he gets a title shot, but I think if he was to win this fight, the UFC might actually start Cody Garbrandt's title run again. And if Deiveson Figueiredo wins, I mean, he's got to win over Rob Font. So if he can beat Garbrandt, that's going to push him back into the top 5 area of the bantamweight division. But I think it's going to be a really interesting fight. You've got the grappling and the power of Figueiredo, but then you've got the speed and the technicality of Cody Garbrandt. So I think it's going to be a really interesting fight, and to be honest, it's probably going to be, it's going to be a really fun way to start off the card. So I'm giving Cody Garbrandt versus Deiveson Figueiredo, I'm going to give that a 7 out of 10. Solid fight. I'm excited to see it. And yeah, next fight on the card, we got Bobby Green versus Jim Miller. Yeah, well, first of all, I'm glad that we actually get to see Jim Miller on UFC 300. Obviously, he's been on 100 and 200, so to be able to see him on 300, it's good. I'm going to give this fight a 6 out of 10. Now, I know it might be quite a low rating, but it's a bit of an awkward matchup. You've got Jim Miller, who's looked great in his last few. Still very dangerous, still hits very hard. Obviously not prime Jim Miller, but it's a really awkward matchup coming against Bobby Green, who's just been brutally knocked out by Jalen Turner. Great boxer. I think it's definitely going to be a stand-up fight. I think they're both going to be quite hesitant, but I do think Bobby Green's going to pick him apart. I don't know why I'm predicting the fight, but no, I think it's going to be a 6 out of 10 fight. It's going to be a fun fight. It's not going to be boring. We're going to see Jim Miller on UFC 300, and if Jim Miller goes out there and puts on an absolute scrap, assuming that this is one of his final fights, this will probably be the biggest fight he has for the rest of his career now. Hopefully Jim Miller can go out there and make it a scrap against Bobby Green. So I'm hoping that it's a scrap, but I'm going to give it a 6 out of 10. Good matchup. Nothing bad I can say about this matchup, but I would have preferred it if it was like a Jim Miller and a Paul Felder, or a Jim Miller and a Matt Brown against another legend. But I'll take Bobby Green. Still a fun fighter, but yeah, I'll give that matchup a 6 out of 10. Then we've got Jessica Andrade versus Marina Rodriguez. Yeah, I don't think this is going to be a terrible fight. I'm going to give it, Jessica Andrade versus Rodriguez, I'll give it a 5 out of 10. I don't think it's going to be a bad fight. They're both coming off finishes. Obviously, Jessica Andrade just came off a finish over Mackenzie Dern, and Marina Rodriguez as well. So they're both coming off finishes. And I really do think they're going to come here to scrap. Obviously, Andrade, she's a scrapper. She's not the most consistent fighter, but she's a scrapper. I'm going to give it a 5 out of 10. I don't think it's going to be anywhere, I don't think it's going to be even the best female fight of the night, to be honest. But I think it's going to be a scrap between two female fighters. Obviously, Jessica Andrade, she comes to scrap. Marina Rodriguez, she has some good wins, does Marina Rodriguez. She's also beaten Mackenzie Dern, Yang Xiaonan, who's literally in the co-main event of this card. So Amanda Ribas as well. So she's a dangerous fighter as Marina Rodriguez, but her and Andrade, I'm going to give it a 5 out of 10. I think it's going to be a fun little scrap, but nothing significant. I don't think it's going to be like, absolutely insane. I don't think it's going to be one of the best fights on the card, but I think it's going to be a nice little scrap for the card. So, yeah, nothing like, Aldana level versus Nunes, but yeah, fun little scrap, 5 out of 10. Next fight on the card, we have Jalen Turner versus Renato Moicano. Yeah, this is going to be a real interesting fight. Obviously, this was a late addition to the card. It only got booked not too long ago. I think, this was the final addition to the card. Yeah, I'm going to give this fight an 8 out of 10. I'm going to give this a really high score. I think this is going to be really interesting. Both of these guys are so fun to watch. Jalen Turner had one of the best fights of 2023 against Dan Hooker, where he just about came short and didn't win the fight. And then he goes out there and brutally finishes Bobby Green. The reason it was brutal is partially because of the referee, but it was still a brutal finish. And then Moicano's coming off a really good win win over a Drew Dober, but Moicano comes to scrap every fight. Even if he's getting battered like he did against RDA, he still comes to scrap, and I feel like when you put two scrappers against each other, who are both going to be willing to put on a fight at UFC 300, headlining the early prelims, I'm going to give it an 8 out of 10. I think it's going to be bloody. I think the battle of the styles is going to be really interesting, and I think the matchmakers have done a really good job adding this fight to UFC 300. So for, yeah, Jalen Turner versus Renato Moicano, easily, I'm giving this fight an 8 out of 10. I think this will be one of the best fights on the card, and definitely the best fight on the early prelims. Then we move on to the prelim card. Starting off with Sodiq Yusuff versus Diego Lopez. Yeah, I don't think I need to explain much. Diego Lopez is one of the most exciting fighters in the UFC right now, and Sodiq Yusuff is coming off an absolute scrap against Edson Barboza, which he did fall short on, but it was still a fun fight. You know, his boxing looked crisp in that fight. I'm giving this one a 7 out of 10. Again, another great way to open up the prelims. This is going to be an insane fight. I do have Diego Lopez winning this fight. But yeah, I think it's going to be an absolute scrap. The striking of Sodiq Yusuff against just the overall well-roundedness of Diego Lopez. On the feet, this is going to be such an interesting fight. And I feel like it's one of those fights that could end at any time. Obviously, Diego Lopez, he's super dangerous on the feet. And then Sodiq Yusuff, super technical. It's one of those fights that you just can't miss between two interesting featherweights. So, Diego Lopez versus Sodiq Yusuff. Yeah, I'm giving this one a 7 out of 10. Great way to start off the prelim card. Then we've got Holm versus Kayla Harrison. This shouldn't be on the prelim. This is going to be the lowest rating fight out of every fight on the card, and I'm giving it a 3 out of 10. I just have no interest in this matchup. Holm, she's just been finished by Silva, and she's literally, what, 40 years old? Why is she still in the UFC? And she's facing Kayla Harrison, another old woman who's lightweight, who's probably not even going to make weight for this fight, coming over from PFL, and she's not even like the elite of the elite in PFL either. Kayla Harrison versus Holm just doesn't really interest me at all, and I don't think it's going to be that fun of a fight. It's going to be Kayla Harrison trying to initiate grappling against Holm, and Holm trying to keep it on the feet. Neither of these guys are interesting fighters. I'm giving it a 3 out of 10. I think it's going to be the worst fight on UFC 300. I don't see any of them finish him either. I don't think Holm's going to be able to, finish Kayla Harrison early. I don't think Holm has the capability for that anymore. And Kayla Harrison's coming over to the big league in the UFC. It's just going to be her trying to out-grapple Holm with her elite judo. I'm giving it a 3 out of 10. I think it's going to be the worst fight on the card, and it just doesn't really interest me. But then we have Calvin Kattar and Aljamain Sterling. I'm going to give this one a 6 out of 10. Now, Calvin Kattar's really fun. He's almost always in a fun fight, similar to the last fight with Moicano. It doesn't matter if he's getting battered like he did against Holloway or he's going out there and battering people. Calvin Kattar is a really fun fighter to watch. And Sterling obviously making his featherweight debut after he just lost a belt in the bantamweight division. I'm going to give it a 6 out of 10. I just worry that the clash of the styles is going to make this fight quite boring, because obviously Sterling's going up to heavyweight, and we know Sterling for being a grappler, and Calvin Kattar hasn't really faced too much grapplers, and I'm just worried that it's going to be a one of those fights where it's going to be Calvin Kattar trying to piece up Sterling on the feet, and Sterling's trying to basically just fighting for his life, trying to get that back, trying to take him down and get the back of Calvin Kattar. And I'm scared that it's going to be a bit of one of those boring fights between a striker and a grappler. Maybe it'll be fun, but I just don't think it's going to be an absolute scrap, because if it's on the feet, Calvin Kattar's going to absolutely piece up Aljamain Sterling. It's going to be super one-sided on the feet. And then when it comes to grappling, Sterling's just not that... He's not that interested when it comes to grappling. He's a good grappler, but he's just not that interesting. So I'm worried that it could be a boring fight, but I'll give it a 6 out of 10. I think it's going to be a decent fight, just not an absolute war. And then we've got Jiri Prochazka versus Alexander Rakic. I'm also giving this one a 6 out of 10. Now, hear me out. I know that people are going to be, complaining, Jiri Prochazka is one of the most interesting fighters in the UFC. What are you on about? But his opponent, Alexander Rakic, and Rakic isn't one of the most interesting in the light heavyweight division. If you watch Alexander Rakic, you'll know that he's not really that fun to watch. He's a good striker, don't get me wrong. He's another good striker in the light heavyweight division. He's not a bad fighter. He's coming back off an injury against Jan Blachowicz, obviously a few years ago, and he's coming back against Jiri, and I feel like because of that, he's going to be quite hesitant. But I just don't know if it's going to be that fun of a fight. If Jiri Prochazka can make it a standard Jiri Prochazka fight, then this could be an 8 out of 10 fight. But I just think Alexander Rakic, he's a smart fighter, but he's just not that fun. And I think it could be, and it's only a 3-rounder as well, I think it could end up being quite a slow-paced fight because of Rakic. And Jiri's going to try and make it a scrap, and yet Rakic is going to try and keep his distance. So I'm going to give it a 6 out of 10. If it's not a 6 out of 10, I assume it's going to be better because you've got Yuri Prohaska. He's not a boring fighter. He's going to make it a scrap. But I'm just scared that Alexander Rakic is going to make it too technical, and he's going to use his range too much. He's going to be quite hesitant because he's only just come back to the UFC. So I'm going to give it a 6 out of 10. And then we've got the main card, starting off with Bo Nickel versus Cody Brundage. Another fight that's misplaced. This shouldn't be on the main card. I'm giving this fight a 5 out of 10. Yeah, I think it's going to go... I don't think it's going to be Val Woodburn level where Bo Nickel gets him out there that quickly because Cody Brundage isn't on the same level as Val Woodburn. Obviously, he's better. But I'm going to give it a 5 out of 10. I just don't really know what to expect from this matchup. It's not going to be a scrap. It's not going to be a fun fight. Cody Brundage will probably finish him in around the second round. I think Cody Brundage will get a finish fairly early on in the fight. But I just don't know if it's going to be that interesting of a matchup. I'm scared that it's just going to be Cody Brundage Bo Nickel holding Cody Brundage down, holding him against the cage, trying to go for the takedowns, and then he's going to get the takedowns, and I'm just not sure if Bo Nickel's going to be dangerous enough to get the finish on the ground. And then on the feet, Cody Brundage is a much better striker than Val Woodburn. I don't think Bo Nickel's going to go out there and absolutely sleep Cody Brundage early on in the fight. I just think it's going to be the worst fight on the main card, and I'm going to give it a 5 out of 10. Not super excited to see this. I do just expect Bo Nickel to finish him in the first 2, but I don't think it's going to be an absolute war. I don't think it's going to be a quick finish like it did against Val Woodburn. So I'm going to go Bo Nickel versus Cody Brundage, 5 out of 10. I'm not super excited for this fight. If it was like a Bo Nickel versus a Chris Curtis against a guy with great takedown defense and is actually a threat on the feet, I would have, maybe given this like a 7 out of 10, but because it's Cody Brundage, not that he's a terrible fighter, but I just don't think the styles are going to be that interesting. It's just going to be another Bo Nickel versus Jamie Pickett type fight. I'm going 5 out of 10. Charles Oliveira versus Arman Tsarukyan. I'm giving this a 9 out of 10. I think this is going to be one of the best fights on this entire card. I'm so excited for this fight. The reason I'm so excited is because I just don't know what to expect. Charles Oliveira is one of those fighters where you want to see, you basically can't count him out because he'll always come out with some shocking result. Justin Gaethje, people thought he was going to get battered. He was getting dropped in that first round, comes out with a finish. Dustin Poirier got dropped multiple times, did Charles Oliveira, and then comes back and submits him. Lost the first round against Michael Chandler, nearly got finished, finishes him in the next round. So you really don't know what to expect when it's Charles Oliveira, but he's facing Arman Tsarukyan. Tsarukyan's coming off a dominant finish over Beneil Dariush, and I think this is the toughest fight for Charles Oliveira in the division, outside of obviously Islam Makhachev. So it's a difficult fight. It's not just another lightweight contender. It's Arman Tsarukyan, and I think because I genuinely can't, it's really hard to pick. I'm going to give it a 9 out of 10. I think it's going to be a war. They're both really good on the feet. They're both really good in grappling, obviously in different ways. Arman Tsarukyan's a great offensive and defensive wrestler, and Charles Oliveira's got amazing jiu-jitsu. So they're both good when it comes to grappling and striking, and I feel like the fact that they're so well-rounded and both fun fighters, I'm going to give this a 9 out of 10. I think this is going to be one of the best fights on the card, undoubtedly. And then we've got Justin Gaethje versus Max Holloway. I'm giving this an 8 out of 10. Again, one of the best fights on the card, 8 out of 10. Yeah, the reason it's not a 9 is because I am a little bit worried, and I know everyone's been, saying that Max Holloway's bulked up and he's looked great in the lightweight division or whatever, but I'm still a bit worried that Justin Gaethje is going to be too much for Holloway. It's a new division against the hardest hitter in that division as well, against Justin Gaethje, who's constant pressure, and I'm just scared that Gaethje's going to break Holloway and get that early finish, and we're going to get robbed of what could have been an absolute war. And I'm not saying if he finishes him, it's going to be a bad fight or anything like that, but I just think it's very, very dangerous for Max Holloway, and I don't think it could be one-sided is what I'm saying, but it's going to be a scrap. I would bet money that this fight isn't anything less than an 8 out of 10. You've got two fighters who comes to scrap every time. Justin Gaethje, in my opinion, is one of the most exciting fighters in the UFC. Max Holloway, look at every single fight he has in the featherweight division, even against guys like Korean Zombie. He just knocked him out, but even that was a scrap. The Arnold Allen fight was a scrap. The Volkanovski fight was a scrap. The Calvin Kattar, every single fight that Holloway has is an interesting stand-up fight. He's never in a boring fight, and when you put two fighters that are never in a boring fight together, it's got to be fun. I'm giving this an 8 out of 10. Really looking forward to this one. Going to be one of the best fights on the card, and hopefully Holloway doesn't get, absolutely broken too early on in the fight, but I'm giving this an 8 out of 10. Then we've got Zhang Weili versus Yang Xiaonan. Yeah, I'm actually quite interested in this matchup. I think Zhang Weili's going to dominate her. I think Zhang Weili is one of the most interesting female fighters right now, and I'm going to give this one a 6 out of 10. For a female fight, I think it's one of the better female fights you can make in the UFC. I feel kind of guilty if I give a female fight anything more than a 6. Maybe if it was Zhang Weili versus Alexa Grasso, I'd give this like a 7 or an 8. Yang Xiaonan, still dangerous. I'm not going to act like she's, you know, absolute elite contender level. I don't think she's going to come close to beating Zhang Weili. Maybe she'll put up a bigger fight than Amanda Lemos did, but I just think it's going to be Zhang Weili dominating Yang Xiaonan with her grappling and it being more, you know, more elite when it comes to the stand-up, superior on the feet. And I just think it's going to be another Zhang Weili domination fight across 5 rounds. So I'm going to give it a 6 out of 10. Not going to be an absolute bloody scrap. It's not going to be, you know, a Zhang Weili versus Alexa Grasso type fight, but I'll give this a, yeah, I'll give it a 6 out of 10. Fun female fight. Good co-main event, I guess. One of the better female fights you can make, but it's going to be Zhang Weili dominating Yang Xiaonan for 5 rounds. And then the main event, Alex Pereira versus Jamal Hill. I'm giving this one an 8 out of 10 as well. This is one of the best fights you can make in the light heavyweight division. 2 dangerous strikers against each other. I can almost guarantee that this one's going to end in a finish. It's a 5-rounder. I don't know who's going to get finished, but someone will get finished. Everyone's saying that Pereira is going to knock out Hill. You know, Alex Pereira's got the dangerous left hook. Jamal Hill's sloppy, whatever. But they're both dangerous. Jamal Hill is a knockout artist. You look at him, he's got the touch of death in the light heavyweight division, just like Pereira does. And if it's not the touch of death, he will exhaust you. He'll just keep coming and putting pressure on you round after round, like he did with Glover Teixeira. He's got some of the best boxing in the light heavyweight division, and he's just really good at managing his distances, Jamal Hill. And then Pereira, do I need to explain? One of the best kickboxers in the UFC. That dangerous left hook, whenever it connects, lights out. He's already got an insane resume, and it pretty much seems like Pereira's untouchable on the feet besides the one time he got caught against Adesanya. It's going to be a fun fight. It's a super interesting fight on the feet, and I can almost guarantee that it's going to end in a finish within 5 rounds, and I'm giving it an 8 out of 10. But yeah, that is my rating for every single fight on the UFC 300 card. Let me know if you agree, or let me know your own personal ratings. What do you think is going to be the best and the worst fight on the card? But yeah, thank you for watching.